This is Mercy Pilkington for Good E-Reader in London at the FutureBook event, speaking right now to Ruth Jones from Ingram, who spoke on a panel today about transformation of academic texts in this digital era. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you spoke on at your panel?
So one of the things we were talking about was the transformation of the academic market and the uptake of e-textbooks or e-content into courses. And for my part, I was talking about our platform called VitalSource, which is the leading e-textbook platform. And really we were focusing on how things are changing, how things are moving from a publisher sells direct model to a more managed model, and the way that textbooks are starting to be integrated into learning management systems such as Blackboard, Moodle, etc. And really the focus was, how do you get content to be taken up in that way, and how do you try and make the take-up of that content move away from the decision-making of the professor to an institutional purchase.
And we've seen a lot of dynamic content that's coming out from a variety of sources even. We did hear, of course, on the panel that the content is going to drive all of it. It can't just be bells and whistles. It still has to be solid content. Why do you think there's so much more adoption at the higher education level, though, than at the public school level, when we've got so many emerging learners who really could stand to benefit from that content?
I guess it's to do with who's got the money. In higher education, there is at least an infrastructure for buying content for various purposes, for research, for learning, for other activities. But when you look at the school level, high school in the US, K through 12, whatever you want to call it, certainly here in the UK, whilst there have been significant initiatives into getting electronic content into classrooms, most notably significant investment a few years ago into interactive whiteboards, and they're in almost every classroom. What doesn't seem to have happened is the automatic take-up of online learning. Now, publishers have themselves been very successful in doing that directly. The educational publishers we have locally all have their own learning platforms, but it hasn't been across the school particularly. It's been in a certain subject. Partly then it's also about the centralised budgets, and I guess if you were going to try and launch a revolution in the way that content was going to be bought, you might not try and do it when there are significant cuts in public spending.
If a school system could take one step to make it more feasible to adopt it school-wide, what would that one step be?
I think they need to take a look at the content that they want to use. And one of the first things that I've seen schools do is take a look at, is my content dominated by one publisher? Does that publisher, therefore, have a methodology that they could deliver to us? It might be that it's a platform like VitalSource, it might be their own platform. And in that case, that's your first step of, can I get something integrated? Am I able to share my learning objectives and my homework with the students using a system? Because only once you have that centralised idea can you start to think about enabling the learning or support text to be available through that interface. I don't think it's reasonable to expect students to log on to multiple systems, to understand what they need to do, to download content, particularly at a school level where that does need to be controlled, not only for the school's purchasing basis, but also in terms of safety and what content is allowed to be viewed. In a higher education model, the thing that's changed here in the UK is that the institutions are now starting to charge fees. And there's been a significant hike of that fee in the last year. To the US, it seems like a very small amount of money. To the UK, it's a huge amount because it hasn't been budgeted for. And so students have moved from being passive learners, albeit many very actively, but expecting to go to university and have that paid for, to active consumers and expecting a lot more money to be spent on them and their learning to be driven by that institution. They are grading their teachers, they are looking at how the course is delivered, they are giving feedback to that. At the same time, having paid those fees, they expect everything to be available for them, just as a law or an MBA student would have expected in the past. So your standard undergraduate is making choices based on, what do I get as part of my £9,000 fee? How is that going to let me get through, get to my learning outcomes, get the degree I want? And so it is a differentiator actually for those institutions.
So I guess my last question will be, though, you have to look into the future for this one. How long do you think it will be before students don't even carry backpacks? They have just their tablet.
I wish it was tomorrow. not just commercially, but also for my children. I don't think they can carry anything much heavier. I think realistically, though, in higher education, we're looking the next 2 to 3 years. There is definitely demand. The supply chain isn't quite sorted out yet, but there are plenty of options there and people trying to find solutions. In the K through 12 market, I suspect that may be more fragmented. But certainly in certain countries, such as Italy, it's been mandated that text should be electronic, as it did in the state of California. So I think those will drive it faster. I think it takes a very forward-thinking schools program to really drive this through. But perhaps with the new curriculum in the UK, then advances can be made.
Thank you so much for your time. Again, this is Mercy Pilkington for Good E-Reader in London at FutureBook.
Thank you very much.